Hey guys, it's Jane. I'm here to talk to you about The Shore of the Women by Pamela Sargent. This is a science fiction story from the 80s. The cover has this banner across it saying the classic feminist science fiction story, and that is really all that I knew when I opened up this book. And it's, calling something feminist science fiction produces a number of different expectations, and they were both met and subverted in my reading of this story. It's not a perfect book, though somebody else has claimed that this is what it is. It is very finely balanced. It has lots of really, really interesting ideas in it and some winning characters. So it's a story that I would say I would totally recommend to anybody who is interested in reading about issues of sex, gender, and power, because that's the main themes being worked through here. It's not, strictly speaking, a novel of ideas. It is, a story with plot and characters, but the ideas are a really strong strand in what's going on in this book. So, the story. The Shore of Women is set in the far future. I think seems to be North America, although that's not 100% pegged down. It's a far future in which the battle of the sexes has come to some sort of possibly natural conclusion, in that men and women are living entirely separate lives. Women live inside highly technologically advanced walled cities with protection from the weather and lots of really advanced technology. They live comfortable lives. Many of them pursue scholarly pursuits. Everything seems to be, generally speaking, really quite nice for the women inside the cities, although there are questions raised about that as the story progresses as well. The men, on the other hand, are outside the walls, and they live with access to extremely limited technology. They're basically hunters and gatherers, subsisting in small bands. They've been told all sorts of nonsense about what's going on in the cities. A false religion has been created by the women in order to control the men, and their lives are, for the most part, entirely separate. The first third of the book, which I personally thought was the strongest, is set up for the largest section of the book, which starts at sort of basically the 1/3 mark. The first third follows the point of view of one young woman coming into adulthood inside the city, and one young man coming into adulthood outside the city. And it turns out later that these are actually twins, which is an important plot point in the latest story. The men do get called to the cities periodically to have their sperm taken. The women reproduce themselves via insemination, and when boys are born, they are kept inside the cities until about the age of 5 or 6, at which point they are mind wiped and sent out with male guardians. And that is how the men outside the gates continue to survive as well. This has been going on for centuries at the point where the story is taking place. It's this very stable, established thing, and hardly anybody questions it. So we have these twins, one inside and one outside, and we're following their lives and getting a picture of what it's like for the men and for the women. There are things going on in the young woman's life that are making things tricky for her, and there are things going on in the young man's life that are making things tricky for him. And that first third has so many sections that really raise so many questions about sex and gender, as in the social construction of roles associated with men and women. I stopped so many times to just sort of really kind of dwell on a statement that had been made because there was huge amounts of really interesting thought in that first section where we lay out the differences between the lives of the men and the lives of the women. The main story starts at about the 1/3 mark with Barana, who is a young woman. She was friends with the girl twin at a younger age, but they have they're no longer friends at the point where the story starts for her. Barana is sentenced to expulsion from the city. This is the harshest penalty that the women have amongst themselves. They don't believe in capital punishment for themselves. Their version of that is being expelled. And the understanding is that, the women will die. Anyone who's expelled will die within a number of days because they're just basically fundamentally ill-equipped to survive outside of the city. So Barana is expelled for something that she didn't do, and it's quite clear that it's unjust, but the powers that be within the city are very kind of, no mercy about it because they're afraid if certain things are let go, then thin edge of the wedge sort of thinking, which means that it wasn't really justice that's happened to her, and that in a way gives her the strength and to bloody mindedness to persist. And then through a number of fortunate circumstances, she actually manages to establish herself, initially disguising herself as a youth. She joins a band of men, and the main part of the story is about Barana's journey outside amongst the men, and it's really about this woman's view of this male society, this really quite violent and bloodthirsty because of their lives being short, brutish and ugly because of circumstances. And yet she sees that there is more potential amongst at least some of these men. I'm not going to say too much more. The writing is clear. I found the characterization quite strong. There are so many ideas worked through in this book, and the results in the end are somewhat ambiguous. You don't come out the end going, well, this was right and this was wrong and this is what they should have done. There's lots of questions raised and far fewer answers given, and yet I actually found it really satisfying. The big takeaway for me from the story is about the fact that power corrupts relationships between people. If what I have said has piqued your interest, I encourage you to go and have a look. I hope you're well, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.